This is so exciting to be here. Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization. We're really devoted to telling stories of hope and success in our food and agriculture systems around the globe, with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food.
We are really excited about today and talking about food because it's a topic we all like to discuss, and it is going to be food and culture, a part of our new arts and culture initiative that we are launching this year.
We're here to explore, challenge, and collaborate, all with a shared goal to shape a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient food system.
This conversation is so extremely important. We all know the battles and challenges that we're facing, not just here in San Diego in terms of food insecurity, but across the country.
Now, the Good Food Movement is about more than what's on our plates. It's about how we build a city where every family has access to fresh and healthy food, where farmers are supported in their sustainable practices, and where policies truly serve our residents and our environment.
We now get to dive into our first panel. Give it over to Anne. Please give her and the panelists a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Danny. Where will restaurants most feel the impact of the election?
I think it's trickle up in the sense that restaurants, we deal with ingredients. And those ingredients may not only be foodstuffs, they're people. With immigration policy, border policies, you could have a really significant impact on American agriculture and imported agriculture overnight, essentially. It looks like a carrot, but that carrot is connected to so many things.
It's really like how chefs and people behind food really deal with crisis all the time. I think of it as much bigger, longer, less dramatic, and how we respond to that and what we work on. So we have a lot of work to do no matter what.
Immigration, labor, all of that stuff. It's all connected. Yeah, it's that carrot that leads to the pea that leads to, I don't know, the sandwich or however it's going to be prepared.
That's, of course, the power of food, the fact that it's climate, it's immigration, it is all of these different things. And why chefs have such an important role to play in using their voice to be advocating for policies that will really help shape the future, including climate-smart agriculture. What are some government policies that might help restaurants and support the business model of restaurants, which is such a strained business model these days, and it's harder than ever to turn any sort of profit running restaurants. So what are some government programs, what are some policies that would help you, whether it's state or federal policies?
I mean, I agree with you that the collective voice of the independent restaurateur and chef is so critical for people to come together. I think we just need to be taxed differently. I think we need, we do so much work in nonprofit. I don't run restaurants today, but I still do a lot of fundraising work for nonprofits, and we're the second biggest employer in the country, and it seems to me that we should be getting some kind of, for some profit, kind of tax status. It's just a lot. It's a lot to manage all of that and run a restaurant and make great food and make great food decisions.
I've had this TED Talk written called Lessons Learned from Paradise. So I've gone from the unicorn place, right, where it doesn't exist. I have 13 different kinds of compost. I grow 85% of my own food. Our food travels on average 34 kilometers from production to consumption. It's nothing.
That's awesome. And
now I'm in a brick and mortar urban setting, no parking spaces, and now I'm like, all right, what do I do? And, the beauty is that San Diego has more private farms per capita than any other county in the United States, which is really cool. But I'm going through the process of trying to add a biodigester and a glass crusher. Well, even if I put the biodigester, I still have to pay for a green bin, right? Even though there's not going to be anything in it. And now I'm creating compost that is immediately usable from this biodigester. Create incentives for actions like that. How do, on a very small drop in the bucket kind of basis, can individual restaurants, then the city says, hey, what a great idea, let's do it by community. I think that's something that I would really enjoy seeing from the government.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, same question for you in relation. You do a lot of work with Black farmers in particular. What are some government programs that would be most beneficial supporting them going forward?
Yeah, so one policy that was implemented in the Inflation Reduction Act was a fund that was created for farm workers or farmers who were discriminated against. Now, this policy wasn't specifically for just black farmers. It really was for farmers who had experienced any kind of discrimination. So that policy, this has been the most successful that has ever been the only kind of, I would honestly use the term reparations type policy that's been implemented that's gone actually directed to black farmers, which is amazing. A part of what was initially proposed that got pulled off the table was debt relief, 120% debt relief. Like debt relief that's supposed to actually make up for the additional financial costs that black farmers had to pay for loans that they were getting that were not at market rates because of racism. We need to change the narrative around what it means to be in food service in general, particularly growing food, because right now it's tied up too much with the history of oppression. And that, I think, is more due to anything else as why you're having a hard time getting young people, especially, to go into what I believe that we have to have farmers if we want to actually be able to eat.
The other big thing, though, of course, climate change. In New Mexico, the Rio Grande is drying up. The monsoons that feed everyone in the summer, they are becoming like more just scarce, and also just you can't depend on them anymore. And also, a lot of population. I ended up in Española, New Mexico, with Don Bustos, who runs a farm that his family has had for 425 years. And he says that here comes the hydrologist from Washington and Albuquerque or Santa Fe saying, "How do you farm so well with the water that you get?" Because, in New Mexico, the traditional farmers are using acequia systems that go back to the indigenous folks and the Moors going back thousands of years. And they ask them how they're getting all this water because they want the water for tech and to grow in the suburbs of Albuquerque. That's why Don Bustos calls Albuquerque, which is a wonderful city, calls it the beast, because the beast keeps wanting more and more water. And so, again, going back to Crossroads, all of these things, farmers have to deal with it. And if we eat, restaurateurs have to eat with it. And if you're just a consumer, well, we have to deal with it one way or another.
Gustavo, Christopher, Elizabeth, Drew, thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to have the chance to hear a series of lightning talks from wonderful change makers who will feature some of their work. For the first of these talks, I'd like to welcome Diane Moss, the Managing Director for Project New Village.
So I think that we're in a landscape of lots of different opinions and voices around food. Some of those come from the public and the private sector. My voice here today is from the marginalized community, or the communities that are underserviced, and it's been this way for a long time. I want to talk to you about what it is that we're doing to make things better where we live. It's not letting anybody off the hook, so if you represent government or a corporation, there's work to do together. I'm going to describe what I think our part is. Sovereignty to me means that you are playing an active role in changing or taking agency for your space. If food is essential to having a quality life, I don't want to have to move to get good food. I want it where I live. If our address or the zip codes where we live have anything to do with the quality of life, I want to have the best experiences without getting in a car and having to move there. Here, I work in southeastern San Diego, and the initiative that we have is what we call, and we've coined, the Good Food District. It's a regenerative placemaking effort where the first thing that we look at is equity and justice first. Second would be people and place-making initiatives, or place-based initiatives, if you will. We employ a market strategy or market-based strategies so that we can produce inclusive and sustainable economic projects in our neighborhood. It's real clear that all the initiatives need to be led by those who live there. And we need to provide opportunities for those people then to own or have ownership in a process of how they get their food or access to food. There's a network of folks that adhere to these principles, and we call ourselves the Equitable Food-Oriented Development, and it's all across this nation where we live. There's a lot of horrible stuff happening, but a lot of good stuff is happening too. I want to tell you what we're doing, particularly in our neighborhood. If we look at a food system, there are parts, and we're trying to impact all parts where we live. So the production piece of things, what we're doing is We might not have the assets and the infrastructure we need to do some things, but some of us own our homes, which means we have land where we live. And where we have land, we can grow things. So we're cultivating a network of backyard growers. Right now we have about 12. We also are putting other growing spaces, partnering with other partners like high schools that have culinary programs. Our office is in a mixed-use development where there's houses on top or people live in apartments on top, but there's gardening space and we're working with kids to grow food. There's private property that we are taking and trying to buy, if you will. And with this property, we're making growing spaces. And lastly, we are working with the church, Seventh-day Adventists in our neighborhood. So before this year is out, we'll have 4 other growing spaces. The other 2 that are in the pipeline involve the city of San Diego and taking a public park and putting a community garden there where we can grow food together. There's a housing complex coming up for seniors, but it's across the street from a school, so we're putting in an intergenerational growing space. The reason we're growing food because the next level of programming is distribution, right? We have one of the only, I guess, mobile food markets in our neighborhood or in our city or in our county. We're bringing local food to our neighbors 8 times a week. And with this food, 25% of it is from these hyper-local neighbors we have. The next level, what we will do is put a grocery store in our neighborhood. We bought some property. We're going to change that property into a food hub. And in this food hub, what we want to do is have our own grocery store, sourced by our own growers. We want eateries there that are healthy because right now we don't have many of those in my neighborhood. I have to go a long way to get homemade soup. But we can bring this to our neighborhood, and all this rests on community engagement. I work with my neighbors on every project that we do, and it is all to benefit those who live there, not only in the consumption of good food and hopefully better health, but also the economy that we live in and circulating, if you will, the dollars that we spend in our neighborhood.
For our next lightning session, please join me in welcoming Mawa McQueen, a chef, author, and restaurateur with McQueen Hospitality.
I want to talk to you about a little place called Aspen, Colorado. So if you don't know Aspen, Colorado, it's in the mountain, and we don't basically grow that much food down there. We have to go 2 or 3 hours. And one thing happened. Back in the day when I was working, I worked with someone. His name is Farmer Joe. So he will take food. He will collect food from farmer, from huskies. He will drive for 6 hours to get there and to get to Aspen. And he had no place. We call him the hippie. You know, he wasn't bougie enough for Aspen. Basically, he was just a farmer who were bringing food. And I felt terrible because he was sleeping in his car. You know, we were the 2 brocade, we'll say, in Aspen. So I'm like, well, don't sleep in your car. I can't afford your food, but you can sleep in my kitchen if you want to. He was so happy. And so we started exchanging food, and I said, so how can I help you? And I brought him blankets, and he said to me, you know what, you did the best thing ever. I've been coming here for years, and nobody ever asked me where do I live and how I survive here. So we end up having a friendship, and this is where I really decided that something was wrong. These people are nourishing us, and we are not doing anything. He couldn't afford a hotel, and those fancy hotels were taking the food. And how come? This was mind-boggling to me. I had my own problem, of course, you know. Okay, getting customer to come to my restaurant. But, you know, misery need company, so we made a friendship, and he gave me fresh food, and I gave him a place to stay, and I learned something. As an independent restaurant, we can all do something. Meaning, you don't have to use everything from the farmer, but you can use maybe one ingredient. Okay? And I think this is the thing. We think that using farmer, you have to use everything, or you need to be a fine dining or Michelin. That's not true. We can all contribute, even if you can afford one tomato, one cucumber. You know, you don't need to spend your whole paycheck, maybe. But there's so many ways to support farmers. And the way I did it is by giving him shelter, and he gave me food. And even until today, I mean, of course, he died several years ago. But today, I make a point to use farmer as much as I can, even though it make my costs going higher, my margin as low, because this is life. I want to cure my body before the outside, I rather have good food, because for me it's a cure, than buy expensive bag. But that's me, and I think this is where we totally mess up as a culture. We don't teach real value to people, what food is. Food is medicine. Food is vaccine. Food is a healer. So we need to really take care of people who grow our food, and it's every single one of you can do that, one person at a time.
Fantastic. Now we're going to have a fireside chat on the role of unions in the growing food movement. So please give them both a round of applause.
You had this improbable feat, this accomplishment of organizing hundreds of Starbucks stores and getting those stores unionized.
Well, we had sort of a perfect moment of a perfect opportunity to unionize. And it started not at Starbucks, actually, but as a geographic campaign to raise standards for baristas and within the coffee industry as part of an industrial union project.
I saw one stat where it said that the filing of union petitions jumped 53% from 2021 to 2022. So there's a sign that you're in good company. But why do you think this is resonating more, given that, again, that most workers are not unionized?
I think people are, especially young workers, are gravitating toward unions partly as a way of changing conditions, and also out of a desire for democracy. Because I think everybody always talks about how democracy is so important and we have to protect democratic institutions, but the most democratic thing that you can do is to organize a union, and I think people really want that voice and that say. Another leader of the Starbucks campaign, Lexi Rizzo, who was also a long-term shift supervisor, said, "We fight for what we love," and I think people have that motivation to fight when they really want to change something. So it's actually an expression of care for your job to want to do everything you can to make it better and not just walk away.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
So we're going to jump right back into the program with our next lightning talk. We have Torre Folks, who is the Executive Director of Turning Tables.
I'm a 20-plus year hospitality veteran. Oftentimes I would be the only person in the room that looks like myself. Was often overtimes passed for promotions, everything that you can think of. Had to create my own access to resources and advocate for myself within the industry. What our 12-week training program does is more than teaching people to put drinks in a glass, is to advocate for themselves in a space. $7.25 an hour is what is the minimum wage in New Orleans, believe it or not. And through our program, we offer them events opportunities where they're making $15, $20 an hour within hospitality spaces as doing events. We provide mental health care for our students within these spaces because New Orleans is often filled with a lot of trauma related to hurricanes and a number of different things, crime. So we address these endemic issues that the hospitality industry ignores. But because of that, I think our students these individuals, hospitality professionals, now feel that they're not going into the industry alone and are warriors for change within the industry.
Now we get to hear from Chuck Samuelson, who is a farmer and the founder of Kitchens for Good and the organization Heal the Earth.
I want to talk about the future of the good food movement through the lens of the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, which literally translated means heal the earth, mend the earth. And we're called on each of us individually, we're obligated to do our part to heal our world, okay? Heal our relationships, to combat poverty and hunger, and to heal our society. And it's through that lens that my focus is on two groups. It's the producers, the farmers, the ranchers, the fisher folk, and the food insecure, okay? And they're so intimately tied together, those groups. They are challenged in such incredible ways. Overfishing, the U.S. Agriculture and Food Organization lists that 34% of our fisheries are overfished and in danger of collapse. Ranchers are threatened by CAFOs. If you don't know what a CAFO is, it's a confined animal feeding operation. And the results of those things are air and food and water pollution, overuse of antibiotics that have a downstream effect on us humans, and other horrible community consequences for those CAFOs, those confined animal feeding operations. Average age of farmers in America is 58.1. We're not getting any younger, trust me. There's less acreage of farms and less farms in America year over year over year. We need to reverse that trend. We need to get more people interested in farming, and we need to make farming a sustainable way of life where you don't have to work off your farm to support your farm like 80% of farmers in America do. Food insecurity. Bob Kaminsky from Feeding San Diego is going to speak a little bit later about this, but I just want to cite some of the statistics very quickly. In 2023, 47.4 million Americans living in food insecure households, 13% of our population. In households of color, it rises to 24%, and one in five are children. 1 in 5 are children live in hunger in America today. We have to be doing better. I don't have answers. I have a lot of questions. I know you're looking for answers too. So I want to start with some questions that matter to me. What is working, and who are we trying to serve? So what is working? Organic regenerative farming. Organic farms account for about 1% of all farmland in America. In California, it's 4%. It will get better. We need to do better. In California, there was a comment earlier about more farms here in San Diego County than any other county in America. Also, more organic farms here in San Diego County than any other county in America. Yeah, oh yeah. We're transitioning our farm to organic. We're a few months away, and I can't wait for that to happen. What might work better? Empowering small producers and food makers like the MICO program here in California. MICO stands for Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operation. Give people control of their own economic destiny by empowering them to own businesses. Own your own business. You'll never need a handout again. Thank you. I appreciate it.
For our final lightning talk, I'd like to invite Monica Ramirez, the founder and president for Justice for Migrant Women, to the podium.
I want you to take a moment, close your eyes. I want you to think about where you were and what you were doing when you got the news that the country and the world was shutting down because of COVID-19. During that time, across the country, the farm worker community that I come from and the farm worker community that I serve was in the fields around this nation laboring. They were laboring to pick strawberries and artichokes and so many other fruits and vegetables that we rely on. They didn't get the news at the same time that most of us got the news. As people around the country and around the world sat confused and terrified, wondering what would happen, realizing for the first time that maybe we had a problem. Maybe there might not be enough food. The grocery store shelves were bare. People were paying outrageous amounts of money to buy things like produce, like toilet paper. Do you remember those days? In the farm worker community that I serve, as soon as I heard the news, I knew that we needed to create a fund, because I knew that there would be monies needed to repatriate the bodies of farm worker community members who died during the pandemic. What I did not expect, though, in those days was receiving phone calls from around the country, not about what was happening with the pandemic, not about not knowing where to get masks. I got some of those calls, but the calls that I didn't expect to receive was the calls that I got from the farm workers who worked all day picking blueberries in Florida and in different parts of the country, who told me that there was no food for them, who told me that they did not have food for their children, who told me that despite working 10 and 12 hours a day, they did not know how they were going to eat or how they were going to feed their own families. The Humans Who Feed Us is a project that I created after being given the opportunity to create an initiative. Right during that same time, Race Forward came to me and they said, we're choosing 18 activists around the nation to build narrative projects to help reframe how people think about and talk about immigrants in our country, including the immigrant women who I serve and who we serve through Justice for Migrant Women's work. And they said, we're giving you $10,000 to create something to help reframe the way people think about immigrant community members. And you can create anything. You can do anything with that $10,000. And so we created the portrait and narrative project, The Humans Who Feed Us, because I'd heard too many times about the hands that feed us. Have you heard that? And every time I hear that saying, the hands that feed us, I think therein lies the problem. When people talk about the hands, but fail to talk about the whole human, we understand that we have a huge obstacle that confronts us. Because over time, throughout the history of this nation, farm workers and other people working in the food system have been dehumanized, have only been talked about and valued and thought of when it comes to what they have produced and how much they produce. And if you're an immigrant farm worker in this nation, often whether or not you're a good immigrant or bad immigrant depends on what you do in the world, and in this case, what you produce. And so The Humans Who Feed Us is a narrative project that set out to make people think about the whole human, about people like Blanca, who's worked here in California for over 20 years with the dream of giving her family a better life. She came here from Mexico, and all she wanted was to be able to give her children the life that she didn't have. We tell the story of Claudia from El Salvador, who came to this nation and co-founded a coffee shop in Oakland in partnership with our good friends at Oakland Bloom. She created her coffee shop because she wanted people to experience coffee in all of its wonderful flavors in an accessible location, but most importantly, in a place and a space where they felt like they belonged, where they were welcomed. We honor the leadership of people like Rufi and Connie, a mother-daughter duo who created a chocolate shop. They created a chocolate shop so they could honor the tradition of their family's recipe of creating Oaxacan chocolate. You see, we have to tell the stories about Blanca and Rufi and Connie and Claudia and all of the humans who feed us so that people understand that they are people and they have dreams and they have vision and they feel joy and they're working so hard every single day for their families and for all of us. We have to tell different stories about people who are employed in the food supply chain, including migrant and immigrant women. See, in my family and in my community, we're often asked to talk about the most painful, the worst things that have ever happened, whether that be the rampant sexual harassment and violence that women experience in the fields, or the wage theft, or being sprayed by pesticides and having children that are born without limbs. We are asked over and over by media, by society, to tell those stories. But our aim is to tell the stories of power, like Maua, of resilience, of hope. You know, during that scary period, I had a conversation with a farm worker in Washington State, a leader, and he said to me, they now think we're essential. It was a great moment of pride. He felt seen. But during that same period of time, those community members were contending with anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-immigrant policies, anti-immigrant sentiments that were harmful and continue to be harmful. Earlier, we talked about the laws that need to change. We talked about the importance of unionization, and thank you so much for your work. But we also have to talk about the fact that farm workers in our nation, with the exception of states like California and New York, farm workers in our nation have been excluded from the most basic federal protections under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Still today, more than 80 years later, farm workers do not have the basic rights that all other workers in this country have. Farm workers across the nation, with the exception of a few states, do not have the right to organize and become part of a union. We have to name that because it isn't a lack of interest. The law prohibits it from making it possible. We talk a lot in spaces about the importance of doing the work together to figure out how we're going to help one another. Trust me, I have been an activist since I was 14 years old. I've been doing this work, I know I look very young, but I've been doing this work for a long time. And I've been in lots of rooms like this where we talk about how we together have to do better. As a daughter of migrant farm workers, the same conversation has happened literally for decades. The people who feed us every single day, whether it be the farmer or the farm worker or the restaurant worker or the truck driver or the grocery store worker, people who in large part, in my opinion, remain invisible in plain sight, like the workers in Aspen, where I have a festival, a Raizado Festival. One of the reasons I created that festival there was because there were so many BIPOC people in that community who are literally invisible in plain sight. And thank goodness for Maua, because what Maua also didn't say when she was up here is that she has multiple restaurants now, and she's a James Beard Award winner. We need more people like Maua leading the way, just like we need Blanca, and we need Connie, and we need Rufi, and we need all of these incredible leaders across our country to have space and a place and rooms like this where they know that people like you and me are going to keep fighting every single day until we actually see justice, until they're finally recognized as more than just the hands that feed us. Thank you.
In 2023, the USDA reported that 13.5% of U.S. households were food insecure at least sometime during the year, meaning the households had a difficulty providing enough food for all of their members because of lack of resources. In your point of view, what's attributed to the food insecurity?
It boils down primarily to economics. And whenever you are seeing, just as you are experiencing here in San Diego County, the extreme cost of living, the inflation that has occurred, the stagnance in the wages, you're struggling. And where is it that you have to make your cuts? You can't pay part of your rent. You can't pay part of your utility bill. So you cut back on food. And in some cases, it's not just cutting back on food, but it's cutting back on the quality of the food that you're feeding your family and yourself. And that has consequences.
We think of it as a food issue. We think about food scarcity there's plenty of food that's being produced, and in fact, I'm sure this crowd knows well that, a good majority of the food that gets produced in this country is going to landfill. So there's plenty of food to go around, but it's an economic problem, and I would argue also it's an issue of power. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is democracy. For us to really address food insecurity and equitable access to healthy food, we need to be a powerful counterforce to the very small number of companies that are controlling our food supply. And that is democracy. So democracy is a full contact sport. It's not just about voting, it's about mobilizing community power, as was just discussed, to counter these incredible forces that are controlling our food and agriculture. So we do that by investing in self-determination of communities to lead and feed themselves, and we also do that by organizing and dismantling these systems that are really harm-doing.
For myself, I can only speak for the community I come from, and that's the Kumeyaay Nation. And food insecurity actually started with the separation of us on the land, and that actually started with the California mission slave system. It stems multi-generationally here, and in ways that we can only share through, today on this stage, but as well as through other experiences happening throughout San Diego and across the country.
How can policy and economic initiatives eradicate food insecurity and transform agricultural systems?
I can't speak to the broad scope of policy and types of advocacy that can be envisioned. I can speak to two that I will focus effort on. The first one, and this has been a very consistent theme through so many of the speakers today, and that's about the local agriculture community, growing of food locally. There is a federal program that is called LFPA, Local Food Purchase Assistance, cooperative program that we engage in as a food bank. And it encompasses the purchase of foods through a federal program from local farms, most of whom are minority or disadvantaged entities that they're owned by. And they are most micro farms, 10 acres or smaller, trying to establish their feet to be able to not just grow food, but to grow a business. The second area that is part of advocacy, which will eventually move into policy.
And I also would want to lift up the power of procurement and the importance of engaging institutions to invest their dollars into local, sustainable, fair food and agriculture. That's really, when we talk about transforming food and agriculture systems, we have to think at that scale. I'm in Los Angeles, California, and my previous work was with the Los Angeles Food Policy Council, and we were able to get LAUSD to adopt the Good Food Purchasing Policy, which redirects $150 million worth of food. I mean, think of the impact that can have upstream for local farmers, for farm workers, because there's labor standards built into this policy. It's the only food procurement policy in the country that has labor standards. And we've heard so much today about how important that is. And it's all to the benefit of the students who get higher quality fresh food in their schools. And for some of those students, that's the only meal that they're getting that day. So really wanting to center the power of procurement policies, whether it's hospitals, schools, senior meal programs, which many of us have been involved with since the pandemic. This can have real powerful catalytic impacts upstream as well.
So when we're talking about agriculture, we often find the voices of Indigenous people left out. So I've been working with the Native Farm Bill Coalition, and they've been working with representatives throughout the United States to bring in those voices to advocate for the needs of Indigenous experts, meaning farmers, meaning basket weavers, meaning seed keepers, the cooks, the preservation experts with traditional knowledge and advocating for what they need. How many Kumeyaay are in here? Yeah. And that's always my question when we're on my homelands here in San Diego. I'm often the only Kumeyaay voice in these agricultural and even conservation spaces that I'm included in. So just ask who's not at the table and why, because it's a systematic practice why Indigenous people, Kumeyaay people are not at these tables, are not, at these panels. We could have had one Kumeyaay person each panel because those were some important topics, as well as just speaking for the voiceless. For my understanding, the elements, the natural, what we call resources, they're relatives. They have spirit. They have, a chemical compound, a vibration, just like we all do. So be the, not necessarily the voice, but support the voiceless. Speak for them when you can in a good way. Speak for the water when you can. Speak for the cultural fire when you can. And speak for the traditional landscapes that we all occupy here on Kumeyaay land in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for joining us.
It's now my honor to introduce a true food systems heroine. Chef Alice Waters is a chef, of course, an author, an advocate, the founder and owner of the restaurant Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California, and the founder of the Edible Schoolyard Project. Alice is also the recipient of the 2024 Julia Child Award. Could you give Alice Waters a big round of applause, please? You've been talking about something called school-supported agriculture. Can you tell this audience what it is and why it's important?
It's really important that we do something that is universal, because we can't address climate just in this country. We have to think of what we really have in common around the world. And of course, that's food and agriculture. And also schools. And so that seems to be the place where we can use the existing money that we spend on food and support the people who are taking care of the land. Now, I think back just to the end of the war, maybe 70 years ago, we only had local food, and it was before pesticides. And I lived in New Jersey, so I knew what it was like to eat seasonally. We maybe had an orange at Christmas from Florida or some dates from California, but only imported were coffee, tea, and spices. So we know how to do this. And during the war, the president asked us to make victory gardens and gave us all the information in pamphlets for every state in the country, every microclimate within the state. And they still exist, those pamphlets. But my parents planted that garden. And that was not just for to have fresh food, but they needed to for the economy of our family. And I just thought, why haven't we asked people to plant gardens? So I have been involved, as you know, with the Edible Schoolyard Project, which is now in its 30th year. But it has a network from one school that we did that has gone around the world. There are 6,500 schools in all different countries because it was an idea that had basic human values. We're going to use a kitchen and garden classroom to teach the academic subjects so that students can learn to cook at the same time they're learning to garden. But this is a Montessori idea, and I can't underestimate what she understood about learning back in the 18th century. I mean, in the 1780s. And she wondered why children who lived in poverty and hunger could not learn like others. So she learned that the senses were the pathways into our minds. And so we need to be smelling and tasting and looking at beautiful things. And what's better than food? And I have to say, the Edible Schoolyard is what has given me the understanding about the power of food. And of course, Chez Panisse at 53 years has given me an understanding of the power of food, too, to make change. And so this is the idea that I think could really work. If we were to decide nationally and internationally that we were going to buy school food directly from the people in the community that were growing it and raising those animals organically, regeneratively, that I know right away that those farmers and ranchers and fishers would all respond, because having a reliable buyer is the most important thing. And schools could be that reliable buyer.
Absolutely.
And I know when the word got out, hundreds of people wanted to sell to us from all of California. So if the word got out that the schools were wanting to do that, it could happen so easily.
Absolutely, Alice. How are food, climate, and hope all connected?
Well, when I started the Alice Waters Institute at Davis, part of the University of California, I thought a model needed to be made and a building could be built. But at the beginning of this year, I got very worried about climate, and I wanted to do something really positive, an event that showed the power of gathering. And I first wanted to do it on the mall with 1,000 teachers and farmers, and we couldn't get them all in time. So the Smithsonian Food History Museum said we can take 200 people or more, and we'll feed them a school lunch that fits into the USDA reimbursement, a school lunch that is local, organic, regenerative. And that's what we did. And we invited everybody we could think of that was involved with schools and farming. I felt the hope in the room because of the collaboration. And I know you are all there today and feeling that energy too. And we're going to try to keep up the network. And I'm hoping with you, so that we can really reach an international audience.
What is your advice on how chefs can continue becoming better advocates for the issues that they see in their own communities, whether it's school food programs or food loss and food waste or access and affordability?
Well, most chefs are great teachers. And I know that many people, young people, have come into Chez Panisse and worked as interns. And it works both ways. They're invaluable to us and they learn. And I like to think of our kitchen as a little bit regenerative because everybody has voice. Those interns have a voice too. And we are trying to find the way that kitchens can work really successfully that way. I think also that chefs can go into schools and give advice, because ultimately I want kids to sit down at a table and eat together. And in a school that had 800 kids, which is what King School had, They came from families that spoke 22 different languages at school. And I figured out how to design a cafeteria so that they could all sit down and eat in sort of two seatings. And school lunch could be an opportunity for academia, that you could have a placemat that talks about the geography of where the food comes from. And you could be eating the pita bread and hummus and seeing where it is on a map. That we have to figure out ways that we really, in that Montessori way, we learn by doing. And I can tell you, kids love to be asked to carry dishes, set tables. It's not considered work that is demeaning. It's considered part of the whole experience of dining together. And sadly, we're not eating dinner together anymore. And that is taking something away from the whole experience of food.
Thank you so much, Alice. We've been learning from you and others for so long. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry you couldn't be here. Thank you again for joining us. It's always wonderful to talk to Alice and so many chefs who inspire the incredible transformation that we're seeing in our food systems. This has been a wonderful afternoon. I want to take a moment to thank all of the speakers who joined us throughout today. Please give them a round of applause. A huge thanks to KPBS for hosting us and producing today's program, and another shout out to all the production team. Thank you to the San Diego Food and Wine Festival. Round of applause, please. I want to thank the entire Food Tanks team, including Kenzie, Bernie, Elena, and so many others who've made this possible. Round of applause. And my final thanks is to all of you. Thank you all for staying with us this afternoon. It's been so fun to see you all. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. And now you get to eat, drink, and be merry.